Thank you so much for joining us at Junction Reads. We are going to be talking to Sam Wiebe about his fifth Dave Wakeland novel, The Last Exile. Did everyone get that? I was muted for a second. Sorry. I'm super excited that Sam Wiebe is joining us today. Thank you so much to everybody for coming. I appreciate it. Sam is here. Sam, thank you so much for coming. Before we get started, I'm just going to share an acknowledgement of land. Kaylee and I join you from Tikaranto, which is covered under Treaty 13 in the Williams Treaties. It is the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Anishinaabe, including the Chippewas and Mississaugas of the Credit. Sam joins us from New Westminster, BC, Kakite territory, the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Halkolaman people, speaking peoples. As settlers and newcomers, we acknowledge and accept our responsibility to care for the land and its resources, while also recognizing the continued displacement and colonization of First Nations peoples across Turtle Island. We are grateful to work in the community on their territory. Sam Wiebe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to ask you just to spend a couple of minutes while people are pouring in. I'm going to ask you to share what you're reading right now, so people can steal some ideas.
What I'm reading right now, I just got a big stack of Cullen Dexter's Inspector Morse books from my local bookstore, so I've been going through those recently. And there's a great story novella anthology called Dead Writers that my friend Ben is in, and I'm very much looking forward to reading that.
Yeah, that's amazing. The Ben is here right now. I've been looking at that. I'm excited to do that. So I'm going to share your biography with everybody before you share a reading with us, if that's okay. Sam Wiebe is an award-winning and best-selling author whose work has won the Crime Writers of Canada Award, the Kobo Emerging Writers Prize, and a silver medal from the Independent Publisher Book Awards, and has been shortlisted for the Edgar, the Hammett, the Seamus, and the City of Vancouver Book Prizes. His novels and a short story about Vancouver PI Dave Wakeland include The Last Exile, Sunset in Jericho, Hell and Gone, Cut You Down, and Invisible Dead, are one of the most authentic and acclaimed contemporary detective series. Wiebe's other work includes Ocean Drive, Last of the Independents, and the Ethan Brand series, A Lonesome Place for Dying and A Lonesome Place for Murder, under the pen name Nolan Chase. And there's another one coming in August, which we're going to talk about. Wiebe has been been the writer in residence at Simon Fraser University and the Vancouver Public Library, has edited the Vancouver Noir anthology, and has been published in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, The National Post, The Walrus, Monte Cristo, and Image Comics, among many others. Sam, I'm excited for you to read.
Thank you so much, Allison. I'm just going to read the first chapter of The Last Exile. So this is chapter 0. The first time she saw Bud Stack, Jan was all of 19, standing at the bar of the Roxy with the Seagrams and Coke and a fake ID. Jan asked her friend who was the devilish-looking guy with the tattoos. Her friend's reply, "Not a guy you want to mess with." Jan had grinned, stirring her drink with her finger. Aren't those the best kind? The guy noticed her, noticing him. He came over, bought her a drink, paying with the $50 bill. Jan, short for Janice? That's a foxy name. I'm Bud with 2 Ds. Never Buddy. From California originally. How about you? Bud Never Buddy had good definition back then. Wore a denim vest to show off his arms. Jan liked his tattoos. This was before every college kid in barista had sleeves and a neck tat. She gawked at the pair of skeletal wings along his right forearm, ending at his wrist. A biker thing, he told her. That mean you're with the Exiles? And before he could answer, she was nodding. That is so freaking cool. Still, Jan had Bud keep his coat on when he dropped her off. Her roommate didn't need to know that the guy Jan was already in love with was pledged to the East Van chapter of the Heavens Exiles Motorcycle Club. She kissed Bud goodbye, watched him drive off, the engine noise causing the entire block to shiver. her man. Hard to fathom that was 40 years ago. Bud still cut a striking figure at 61, though his chest was broader, arms had a little sag. Didn't matter. He'd never hit her, never embarrassed her, and he still possessed the ability to surprise. Like tonight, taking her for dinner on the town. A reward from the club president for completing some little errand. They'd gone to the Joe Fortes chop house for tequila and a steak dinner, then taken in a Whitecaps game. $100 shots of Clase Azul, champagne in the skybox next to the executives' wives. Not bad for a girl from Campbell River. And then home. Of all her possessions, all aspects of her lifestyle, the jewel was the $4 million float home docked at Granville Island. Furnished just the way she wanted, with Bud's photos on the walls. He actually had quite a good eye. And their bedroom on the top tier overlooking False Creek. They lived in a dream. Even better, a dream on the water. "Take me to bed," Jan said to her husband. They drove home across the Cambie Bridge through the makings of a thunderstorm. Bud had taken a couple of long necks for the road. The only time he'd ever been pulled over, the traffic cop, instead of writing him up, had taken Bud's empties for him. That was the respect her husband commanded. He parked the Carrera near the gate to Sea Village, not worried about a ticket. Jan followed him down the gangplank to their front door, holding on to both rails. Mucho tequila plus a bottle of Veuve Clicquot. Looking forward to kicking off her pumps, fooling around, then falling asleep with the TV on. But the TV was already on. Had Bud left it going, or Jan herself in the rush to get ready? Maybe a power surge. That happens sometimes. The only drawback to a float home was the utilities, all the cords hooking you to the mainland. Once in a while the TV flickered, the clock on the stove had to be reset. So what? The trade-off was the view, the feeling of life rushing underneath you. Inside, Bud tossed his blazer over the lazy boy. A saccharine smell filled the ground floor. Sandalwood and teakwood, vanilla and rose hips and lemon. Her scented candles in the upstairs bathroom were lit. All of them. Soft music from upstairs as well. Diana Krall, All or Nothing at All. "Someone having a soak?" Jan whispered. She watched her husband flip the lid of the ottoman, pulling a blue plastic clamshell out of the storage beneath. He shushed her, digging his keys out and unlocking the case. The slim, chrome-plated pistol inside smelled of machine oil. Bud thumbed shells into the clip, inserted it, and racked the slide. "Stay down and stay quiet," he said. It never entered her mind to call 911. Jan counted his footfalls, soft on the carpeted stairs. The storm had the water agitated. Rain slapped the windows. The house pitched and settled as if drawing a breath and exhaling. Jan thought she heard water from upstairs, the drain being pulled. The music soared in volume, filling the house, her good sound system distorting. Jan heard a heavy splash. She moved to the bottom of the stairs, heard her husband scream. Oh God, she thought, oh Jesus, what do I do? Bud was her life, and yet she ran from him, booze and panic dulling her brain, pausing at the door to put shoes on. No, run, get out, get safe, he'd want that. Bud. Jan opened the door, saw the woman standing on the threshold, the broad smile on her face, a hand thrusting out as if in greeting. The world moved a little off-kilter. The music was off, and Bud had stopped howling. Jan was on her back, rain pelting her bare feet. The woman was upstairs now, speaking sharply to someone. "Hold it like this, dummy. Keep the blade away from yourself." Now the footsteps were louder and they were coming down the stairs, the woman and someone behind her, the woman carrying an axe, and Jan was 8 years old again, on stage in a school play, a small child in a troll mask calling up to the other children, "Who's that trip-trap tripping on my bridge, bridge, bridge?" And Jan thought of how unfair life was, to be together 40 years, and alone now, here, at the end of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you opened with this, mainly because I love that the novel opens in the perspective of Jan, whose life ends before the novel really starts, or the story really starts. I want to talk about genre because a lot of what I felt reading this book was the darkness of Vancouver. And on your Substack, which I read, which I strongly urge everyone else to subscribe to and read, you write, I don't write beach reads, nor do I write can lit. What I do write is contemporary West Coast crime fiction. And I want to talk about that. Another reviewer described Greater Vancouver in this novel as giving Gotham a run for its money, which I also totally agree with. Um, can we talk about genre? Can we talk about contemporary West Coast crime fiction?
Absolutely not. No, no way in hell.
Which,
No, of
to be
course.
honest, I know
Of course.
everything, and I didn't know that before.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, I mean the genre is mystery is such a large umbrella term, and
Yeah,
crime fiction can be either a synonym for that or something different. Detective fiction can be a synonym or something different. Um, but what I hope to do is write realistic fiction about the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest, where I live.
hmm. And does Ethan, the Nolan Chase novels, do they do kind of the same? Do they have the same sort of rich, dark vibe, do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't think that they're less realistic per se, but they definitely have less of the social commentary. I mean, they're much more of a, like a straight ahead mystery with the puzzle at the center and a
Right.
lead character that you kind of root for. Whereas the Wakeland novels are more in the Raymond Chandler genre, where you're following this guy through the different parts of a city, and some of those can be really dark, but like the appeal is, you know, going with a character that you whose voice you like and seeing the world the way they see it.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, a little bit lighter, I would say, just in terms of like the prose is a little quicker, but I think they are doing the same thing in a different way.
Right. And Dave Wakeland specifically, I think he feels like he's walking around in this darkness trying to find purpose. And so I want to talk to you about morality because it kind of felt throughout, like not just the social justice we talk about, the cost of real estate in Vancouver, the cost of real estate in any big city, and the social cost of all of that. But also at the heart of the book is Dave Wakeland's struggle with his morality, with his kind of feeling like, do I have purpose? And he himself says, I assumed my work made no financial difference. I also assumed it made a moral difference, a small but real contribution, finding people, finding answers that mattered. And I was hoping you could expand for people who haven't read the Wakeland novels and who are just going to dive in, just expand a little bit on Dave and his kind of foundational morality.
Sure. Well, like I said, I mean that is a character who's out of the Raymond Chandler mold, and Chandler's Philip Marlowe is like both the author's voice and conscience, but also just a small business person who's caught up in these, you know, big scandals, family secrets, things like that. So in Wakeland's case, it's about someone trying to find their place in the Vancouver of 2025, where it's impossible to live unless you're a millionaire, and around every corner is some weird real estate swindle, and everything feels very compromised and corrupt, and he's very much a part of that. Like he's not a savior character who's like parachuting in to save things. He is as mired in these social issues as anyone else, and I think that if he does have a heroic part, it's just kind of pushing through that and saying like, okay, I just want to get an answer to this. Like, I don't care if it costs me a certain amount, but I'm willing to persevere, even if it's not to my financial benefit or to my health.
Yeah. And he does, I mean, the kind of a thread. I don't think this is a spoiler. I can't. I think we discover that his sister is in prison because he essentially could not ignore evidence, and that morality as well. The and maybe this is a common thing among detective series, that they have these relationships, whether they're family relationships or romantic relationships or work relationships. Like there's this failure to thrive kind of thing in all of the relationships Dave has in the novel. And that is kind of like, you would sort of think, okay, this is a moral failing. No one likes him enough to, to have him in their life um, too much. But it's also part of who he is, right? And again, without saying anything more about the ending, he's alone at the end, um, drinking a glass of wine, a very expensive glass of wine, and I'm left kind of thinking, this is how it's going to be for this guy. He's going to be alone, and I don't know. I kind of think, how would he focus on the important things in life if he wasn't?
Yeah,
Like
I think that's very true.
if he had a relationship that worked.
Yeah, I mean, I ended the last Wakeland novel with him making a decision to leave, and now he's sort of at the point where he has to come back. And Vancouver's changed a little bit. He's changed a little bit, and things are a little bit more difficult for him. And he does need to kind of dig his heels in a bit more. And I mean, I love a series where there's, like a bunch of characters helping out, but I feel like with the Private Eye story, like it's at its best when at the end of the day it's about one person making a choice. And
Mhm.
it costs him to leave, and so he has to reckon with the cost when he comes back. And then it costs him something else when he decides, you know what, this is my home and I'm sticking around here. And
Yeah.
I yeah, I wasn't sure when I got to the end that it was correct, but it felt realistic to me, because the last thing I wanted to do was have this character, as he's approaching, you know, 40, still sort of like, well, I can't really afford to live here, and complain. So it's, he does what we all have to do. He kind of grows up and says, okay, like, not everything can just be me doing exactly what I want, but that
Mhm.
does cost him something.
Yeah. And you set up the end so well. I mean, it's kind of where he ends up. I was like tingling, thinking, oh man, this is like a perfect setup, perfect place for him to be for the next novel, because it's just such a cool finale. But you talk about all of these people that are in his life. I was so impressed with the cast of characters in this novel, like just all of them being questionable bad people, questionable good people, questionably the bad guy. But also, that, like, thinking about that and the inspiration behind that, I went back, because this is my first, not my last, Sam Wiebe novel that I've read. But you've got the cold case of a murdered or and missing sex worker, police corruption and college scandals, ego and ambition and organized crime, underground gangs and class warfare. Behind the scenes in a sitcom is the short story, which I urge everyone to find and read. And now the biker gang mystery. And can't wait to find out what Ethan is up to in the Nolan Chase novels. But if this is a crappy, too big situation question, then don't answer it. But let's talk about inspiration. And you
Well,
could talk about the Earl Grey tea here too.
ha, um, well, the twin inspirations for the series, other than Earl Grey tea, which was my drink of choice when I started writing, and I thought was just kind of a neat colonial tip of the hat to one of the things that makes Canadian life a little bit different and a little bit more British than a detective in the States. But the two things that the series really revolves around are what's going on in Vancouver and the private eye novel, the conventions, the stuff that I read, and occasionally like old Rockford Files episodes that I watch. Like there's always something about the way the private eye novel has been written that I really love and respond to. And when I read a good one, I want to like add to that canon. And then when I read a really bad one, I'm like, no, well, here's how I would do it.
Right.
And like I love those figures like the femme fatale, but in 2025 you can't really do the like shoulder blade, shoulder pads and standing by a Venetian blind, like all that kind of
Yeah.
film noir stuff. But like so digging into those kind of cliches or conventions and figuring out what works for modern storytelling is really interesting to me. And then also just Vancouver, like it's changed so much, and it's constantly surprising to me.
Hmm.
Like when I wrote the previous book, Sunset and Jericho, I was going to work every day and passing signs that said, "You don't need $1 million to live here. Like you can buy an apartment if you only have $900,000."
Right.
And so that novel was very angry. And in this one, there are other things that really motivated me. You know, One of the things that I think the city is starting to lose is its kind of working class sense of itself. And
Mhm.
areas like Granville Island that, when I was a kid, that was sort of the like hippie-ish arts fair kind of place. There's like a writing school there. And now it's almost like a parody of itself. Like it's really expensive and bougie, and it's still nice. So trying to reconcile those kind of things. And my friend Charlie had this expression when we were talking about this, that the city kind of lost the smell of sawdust, that sense
Mhm.
that like people were making things, and that there was industry here. So that's really what Wakeland is reckoning with in this book, and the case that he's trying to solve, where this woman has been wrongly accused of murder. She's a real like East Van Italian, old immigrant family. Like there's something about her that he recognizes as like part of that sort of vanishing Vancouver.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
because
I hope
she's
that
so.
wasn't a rambling answer to your question, but
No, 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 totally fair. I mean, I had a kind of follow-up idea that sparked about reading newspapers and stuff, but it's probably not a great literary question. I loved Maggie Zito because, like, in that, authentic way a character is drawn, she's a bitch. She's like, questionably a fantastic mom who makes terrible decisions. And so when reading her, I thought, I bet you any money there is a certain kind of reader who would read her in a really negative way, And then, but as I was reading her, I'm like, oh man, she's like my absolute favorite character um, that I've read in a long time. So kudos to you for creating her because she does a great job in the book, as does her sister. You did really well with that, with
thank you.
those people. But what just sparked into my head while you were talking about influences and everything, I want to ask you if you could recommend a TV series that is most aligned with how you would describe that kind of West Coast dark contemporary crime fiction. If there's one on TV right now that you've watched and you thought, oh man, that's like exactly the kind of thing I'm doing or I want to do, or.
Well, I mean, in terms of stuff that's actually set in Vancouver, we were very lucky that Chris Haddock produced several really good shows here in the 90s and early 2000s. Da Vinci's Inquest is probably the best known, but Intelligence was also really good.
Mhm.
Um, But as far as stuff that's on TV now, there's a British show called Sherwood, which is set in like the north of England, and it's like the best thing I've seen since The Wire in terms of looking at a community of people where it's not passing judgment on the criminals or praising the cops unrealistically,
Hmm.
but also looking at the fallout of this big mining strike that happened in the north of England, and half the town chose to go on strike and half the town chose to be strike breakers, and like 2 generations later they're still dealing with those choices. So I love that show, Sherwood. It's terrific.
Yeah.
And like Vera and all those sort of like they're all just amazing. Honestly, like I just watch British TV and I feel so jealous that like there isn't like BBC Vancouver that I could I could pitch stuff to.
Right. That Scandinavian stuff too. Like there's a real kind of not to take us down a promoting television thing, but I just watched I'm not going to remember it, the Scandinavian thing where the main character was very much like Dave in this like conflicted moral way, like doing the right thing, but also the right thing is going to bring like serious amount of unhappiness to the people in my life that I love. Um, and I want to talk about family again because the scene between Dave and his mom, I thought was really, really great because it soon followed the scene with his sister. Um, so there's and I kind of feel like the family's sort of the subplot running in, but you write after after Dave visits his mom, two people who fundamentally misunderstand one another, uneasy at the bond that connected them. That was also family. And so I want to talk to you about family because Shuzhen and Jeff, her cousin Jeff, have that. And then among all of the, quote, bad guys, there's family dynamics that are brought into question and explored. I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that was on my mind at the time. I mean, I had family stuff of my own that was coming up, but also, I mean, it's hard. Like, I really don't want to spoil the other books, but at the end of Sunset and Jericho, Dave's sister goes to prison, and he's kind of responsible for that. And I thought that was another one of those moments where when it came to write that scene, it was like, oh, this is how it would go with these characters. Like he doesn't care so much about putting people in jail or the justice system, but it's definitely like this is the right thing to do because if I don't, it's going to come back on these other people who are innocent of this.
Hmm.
So, he makes a really rough choice in that. And part of what's going on in The Last Exile is him, kind of avoiding putting off seeing his sister until he can you know, think through the consequences of what he's done and what she's done, and hopefully forgive each other a little bit. And the same with his mom. That character is really kind of based on my grandmother, who was like a great sour German lady who had weird, racial views and all sorts of things. And she was somebody that like was very important to me, but also like, yeah, we just you know, did not get along. So representing that as part of it too, that, we all have these family relationships that are very, very weird, and you end up, having political differences or social differences with them, and having him kind of have to deal with that. I just thought it was an interesting counterpoint to the murder mystery.
No, it was really good, and it also played with this idea that he's struggling with that we talked about earlier, this kind of debt to be paid, right? Like he's kind of living this life where he's like, I have this debt to be paid. I have to do this. Like, I wanted to be out, but I always knew I wasn't going to be out. And even at the beginning when he's called to Vancouver, he's like, I have to go, right? And his mom and his sister are part of this bigger life debt. And it kind of it's a great character dynamic because you're left there sitting and thinking, is this guy ever going to be happy? And failed romances are, I think, part of this genre anyway. But this question of is he ever going to be happy runs through the novel too. And your choice of ending, I thought, was perfect for so many reasons because it's like, oh man, this is going to be so great. He's going to be so happy. He's like, life's going to be so fantastic. Except what that also does for people who read a lot is inform us from, the great height, how far someone can fall. And yeah, anyway, that's talk about rambling. That was just like, whoa, blah, blah, blah. Um, does anyone else have any questions? Sorry, I'm all over the map here. As I said to Sam and Kaylee before we started, I feel like I'm like full of beans, like maybe I had coffee too late or something. Yeah, if you have any questions, just ask Kaylee in the chat and then they can ask on your behalf. Um, so I want to talk about the Nolan Chase novels for a number of different reasons because I feel from a writerly perspective how complicated it must be for you to sit down and write. Ethan Band, is it Band or Brand?
Brand.
Brand, and then go to Dave Wakeland, and you've got a Nolan Chase novel coming out in August. So this is probably more a writerly question than a Last Exile question, but I want to talk about that. Life as a writer, two novels coming out within like 7 months. How are you managing that?
Well, it's been great. Basically the Ethan Brand series was, it was my attempt to do like a Longmire or Jesse Stone or Inspector Gamache, like that sort of a little bit less violent and a little bit more of a puzzle-based and community-based small town mystery, which, it's not my primary love in the crime genre, but I do really love that when it's well done. And they're very comforting. And, when you have like a great lead character and you're just kind of following them through this town that changes. Thomas King writes a great series about a photographer turned detective named Dreadful Water that is like that too. And
Mm-hmm.
it's half of it is following the case of the week or the case of the book, and then half is about this town and how it grows and how it responds. So I set that Ethan Brand series in Blaine, which is across the border in Washington State, horribly crushed by these tariffs, but it's a really small town that sees millions of people cross that border every year. So you have all the nice stuff about a small town where everybody knows everybody, but also it's linked to these big transnational criminal issues like
Yeah.
smuggling and trafficking and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a really exciting series to write. And, Wakeland is a very personal character. He's working in Vancouver, which is my hometown and the place that I know better than anywhere. And it's a first person story. And then getting to write Ethan Brand is more like, it's like getting to write for like Clint Eastwood or Tom Selleck or someone like that. It's like, they're cool. They're not super introverts who are, tortured. They're much more, um, personable and likable, affable, one might even say.
Yeah.
And I really like the challenge of writing that small town mystery. So it's a nice compliment actually, and going between them is actually very refreshing because by the time I finish writing an Ethan Brand book, I'm like, oh, like I kind of have an idea for a private eye story that I want to tell. So
Right.
yeah, there it when I first had the pen name, I was a little bit like I didn't know how this was supposed to work, and the publisher had certain things that they were looking for, and I like looked at my social media and I was just like, I'm not starting a Nolan Chase Instagram and like that all that stuff was so horrible the first time I set it up. So I sort of I made it a very open pen name. Like I'm both of these
Yeah.
people, all these books are mine, and however you find it, I'm happy about that.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, either people find out or, by some miracle they don't. But I agree with you. Like publicity is complicated enough to have to split it down the middle. But how are you having like, this is fresh, right? Look, The Last Exile is just like hot off the presses. You're going to be like, I'm assuming doing book club stuff and conversations and everything with The Last Exile, and then just having to flip a switch and become Nolan Chase.
Yeah, but it's all it all comes from the same place, but also if people don't know who I am, like it actually just makes it fine. Like I didn't become a writer because I wanted to be like doing publicity all the time. So I
Yeah,
love talking to people about books, but if they, like if I get invited to do stuff as Nolan Chase, like it's the same person showing up. And
yeah, yeah,
you know, the so yeah, like I've simplified it as much as I can, and yeah, it's been fun though. It's been a lot more fun than I thought.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Okay, I think there are a couple of questions. I just yeah.
Yeah, we have a question from Chantal. Chantal says, in terms of writing about subcultures like bikers, etc., what sort of research do you do? Is there a Terry Rhodes in your life willing to give you insight into the hierarchies and dynamics, or is it more researching online or in true crime books?
Well, it's both. I mean, I do a lot of research. I talk to a lot of people in law enforcement, and I have talked to a few criminals and people who are kind of, have uh, a view on that side of the law. And then yeah, like a ton of newspaper research also. Kim Bolan from the Vancouver Sun is one of the best crime reporters in Canada, maybe the greatest. Um, but also it's about taking that research and extrapolating and telling a story with it. And in the piece that I read, uh, I put in the Joe Fortas Steakhouse just because it was a cool Vancouver landmark. It's named after the first black lifeguard in Vancouver history. And I had lunch the other day with a guy who was the son of a biker, and he was like, "Yeah, that's where we used to go and hang out and like do shots and stuff. How'd you know?" And I was like, "I don't know, I just made it up." But
That's amazing.
sometimes you get lucky. But yeah, like anything you try to get the details as right as you can, but it is fiction at the end of the day. Like they're not based on real people. So I've been very lucky that people will talk to me, but yeah, it's not like an expose on the biker world or anything.
And that Terry, just a thing about Terry Rhodes, because I meant to ask you about recurring characters, and because he exists in, I'm not sure if it's more than one other book, but do you have characters that when you write them, you think this person is going to exist in another, like I'm going to carry them forward, or do they just sort of appear when you start writing?
Well, I think a much smarter person would have set out to like create a list of recurring characters and kind of service them in each book. With Invisible Dead, like so much of that book and its subject were uh, I mean, it's about missing women, and that's such an awful and large topic. I knew I couldn't take that on in a novel. And I was definitely not the person to write like the definitive history of that subject in Canada. So I just focused on one missing woman and used that case to kind of discuss what's going on in Vancouver. So Terry
Mhm.
Rhodes shows up in that. He's a very vicious, organized criminal, who uses the idea that bikers are these kind of rough, lovable, like, swill a few beers in the parking lot types to run like a very efficient and violent criminal enterprise.
Mhm.
Um, and when it came time to write the other books, I knew I did want to bring him back, but I also didn't want to make him show up in every book because I don't know, I don't like when the conventions tell you where the story is going to go. So
Mhm.
he shows up in Hell and Gone as someone who's accused of a crime. And then in this one, he's somebody that Wakeland has to touch base with when he gets back into town because he's kind of the last person he knows in that world. And every one of those encounters goes horribly wrong for Wakeland. They're all very violent, and the character is a bit of a nightmare. But I don't want to just throw him into every book
Mhm.
to you know add suspense or anything.
Yeah. No, he is another really super great character.
Thank you.
Kaylee.
Was the like spotlight and unmute myself takes like just too long. We have another question from Angie, and Angie says, I understand that Sunset and Jericho was possibly meant to be Dave Wakeland's last story. How did it feel to resurrect Dave? Did it feel organic? The idea was so strong and compelling that you just had to bring Dave back to Vancouver, or was it a bit conflicting?
Oh, great question. Well, that was one of those things where like I always wanted to just write a detective series that would be ongoing. Like that was always the dream. But with Sunset and Jericho, I was at a point where, just certain things in like both personal life and business were making it very difficult to keep writing that series. So I didn't know it was going to be the last one, but I wanted to write a book where I was like, if that's the last word I get to write ever, um, I'll be happy with that. And I think that book serves that purpose. Um, but honestly, the second I started promoting it and selling it, I was like, no, I love this character. I want to keep going with these forever. Then the thing was either to write a book where, if Wickland leaves town, will it take place in wherever he lands, like Montreal? Or what is the case that's going to bring him back? And so I stewed on that for a while and just settled on this idea of someone from that vanishing, disappearing type of Vancouver, that working class Vancouver being falsely accused and that being the thing that brings him back and makes him realize that like yeah, this place is really awful a lot of times, but it's also home and you have to make your peace with that. So
Mhm.
I was conflicted, but the nice thing about this series and detective series in general is that it's not just like the continuing adventures. Like each story does have to stand alone and you can kind of pick them up. Like you can start with The Last Exile. You can start with Sunset and Jericho. So that's something that I really do work on. Like I want to make each book, um, they build on what comes before, but they're also standalone.
Mhm. Yeah, there's that like connected short stories, right? Where you pick up a novel at any point and you're just comforted by the familiarity of the characters and the surroundings and something um someone familiar is going to show up at some point. There's a
Yeah.
question from Naben.
Yep. We have a question that is from since the Ethan Brand series is set in Blaine, do you think you will have to address the recent economic and political developments in the US/Canada relations in a future book? Do the slightly cozier elements of this series mean that you try to avoid more charged political discussion?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't try to avoid them, but I definitely try to take a step back from the sort of Trump feedback loop that the world is caught in because I don't find him all that interesting. And I just think that if you're a reckless goon and all you do is reckless goon stuff, like there's no need to just comment on it constantly. Um, and yeah, the series is slightly cozier, so it's more about that community. But I've had some wild interactions going down to Blaine for research, and it's a very cool city, but it's being hit very hard. And I think that a lot of the people were not expecting that. They were expecting a savior to come in. So when it comes to write the next book, it might seep in there, but probably not in a, here's what Sam thinks of the socio-political situation in the States. Like it's, they're meant to be they're meant to be mysteries. And I think the great thing about writing a genre that's mostly entertainment is that you're speaking on the same level as the reader. Like you're not talking down to them. And you're kind of welcoming them in, even if they're a little bit different than you. So I do try to do that.
Hmm. Maybe a politician slash reality star is found dead in Vancouver, and Ethan has to come up and help Dave solve the murder. Um, that's a dream. That's just a dream. Kaylee, any other questions? No. So my final question, I think, is just what are you working on right now? And what what are you most excited about working on? Like, if it's not what you're working on right now.
Well, right now I'm working on two things. I'm starting to put together the next Wakeland novel, which is always exciting for me. Um, whenever people talk about their writing process, like every one of these books has been written differently.
Yeah.
So, like some of them, like I knew exactly how it was going to end. Some of them were outlined more. And this one is finding its own way, which has been very challenging. And then the other thing that I'm working on is my first nonfiction book. I signed the contract a couple weeks ago for a book about
Wow.
um, movies and TV shows that are shot in Vancouver and BC. Which range from like really high-end great movies that everybody loves, like like the Shogun miniseries and First Blood, like the first
Mhm.
Rambo movie, all the way to, like the worst garbage ever put on celluloid. And I love it all and I find it all really fascinating. So writing a book about just the weird history of Hollywood North and some of the stories of that. So it's very exciting to me. I'm also just watching a ton of very odd movies that range from like very high end kind of cult classics to just absolute dreck. And that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm currently obsessed with family law, so I really hope that that's not part of the shit list, whatever.
Oh, there's no shit list. It's
Good.
it's all like I say that, but like I grew up watching X-Files and Highlander and all that, and it's very dear to my heart. So no, it's the whole point of the book is not to mock those things because they're made by real craftspeople
Yeah.
and even the worst stuff, like you watch it and you see this version of Vancouver history or BC history that's captured on film. I think that's really cool. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I love that too because anytime I watch something that I think, oh my gosh, how did this get made? I think that there is someone else on the other side of the world or on the other side of the city sitting down in front of this and going, this is the most amazing thing I've ever watched in my life. And it's the same with books, right? Like that's why I'm not a huge fan of negative criticism. I know people have different views about that, but I agree with you. Like there is a huge fan for every piece of art ever created. Thank you so much, Sam. Chantel has a question. Chantel, if you send me an email, I can forward your email to Sam. Chantel's asking about mentorship. Um, if you do private stuff, so I can connect you, Chantel. If you send me a note, I can forward it to Sam.
I will just say that the Humber School of Writers, they run like a summer program that I'm not involved with, but they have great mentors. And then I work in the year-long mentorship program. So it starts in the fall and it goes through the spring, and it's just wrapping up this year. But they take new writers on, and you work one-on-one with an established writer, whether it's me or somebody good, and they look at your work and give you really one-on-one personal feedback. It's the best creative writing program I've ever been a part of. I wish it existed when I started, and I'm very honored to be a part of that. So that's the Humber School of Creative Writing.
Yeah, I know a bunch of people who went through it and they absolutely love it. So I also highly recommend it. There's a week-long workshop in July as well that has a whole bunch of stuff running about creative writing. That is it. That is all from me. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts?
Not really, but if you want to see a great light mystery show, you should watch Ludwig on BritBox or BBC. It's really terrific.
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Kaylee, as always, for running the show. I am going to be on Instagram Live this Thursday for a writerly conversation with Kirby. We're going to talk about poetry and prose and poetry for anyone who's excited to hear me fumble talking about poetry. Sunday, April 27th, we're going to be live streaming an in-person event at Type Books in the Junction with Jules Delorme, Aaron Kruder, and Daniel Sarah Karasik. And that is it. Thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.